Human Vengeance, Chapter 11, Second Contact. A single drone was sent to investigate the signal we had found. What we could make out was a distress signal, repetitive loops echoing out. If it were so, the drone should, in theory, be able to provide basic assistance, at least until we could get a manned vessel there. If it proved to be a trap, then we would at least only lose something minor. It was the best we could do, the wounds we had received flaring up once more at the contact. When it came upon the site, it seemed more apparent that it was a legitimate signal. A sleek 100-meter ship floated aimlessly, a patch of its exterior blackened and jagged. From the look of it, something inside had ruptured, knocking them out of whatever path they were on. A basic scan showed 5 life forms on board. They were spread around and clearly moving. As for what races they were, it was unclear. They were small and stocky from the readings we received. A quick discussion occurred on what we should do. A minority proposed using them as practice for our warships. They saw all aliens as the enemy, rather than specifically the Gvarg. Thankfully, their voices, whilst loud, weren't numerous. Instead, it was decided to assist. If it turned out they were directly responsible, then we would make sure they disappeared. If not, then we had a good way into the center. With it in mind, the GUS Wolf was deployed. During its passage, the drone made itself known. With our limited understanding of their language, we did our best to broadcast a message of peace. Thankfully, the essence came through, and unmistakable tones of gratitude were received. Relying heavily on pictures, they showed what we thought. Part of their ship had seriously malfunctioned, basically killing their engines and what looked like the main reactor. They were relying on backup whilst attempting to make repairs. With permission, we used the drone to nudge them towards the Genesis 3 colony. Compared to the distance needed to go, it was a futile gesture, but it at least gave the appearance of assistance. All the while, GUS Wolf was on its way. Soon enough, our first ship arrived. It initially raised alarms, as they panicked at the sight of an armed ship. But before they could do anything rash, Wolf gave a similar message of peace. With it there, the situation rapidly improved. A launch bay was isolated, and their crippled ship was gently towed in. Wolf took over the translation efforts, quickly improving on our lexicon. By the time they were safely stowed, we could talk in simple terms. In the apparent interests of safety, we requested information on their genetics to ensure that a lack of disease would not be able to jump the species gap. However, whilst it was a significant part, that wasn't the only reason. The more we knew about them, the better if things turned sour. They were more than willing to help. As we connected them to the Wolf's power supply, they prepared a mass upload from their medical systems. It covered not only them, but all species, and even as they sent it, we set up a live feed to truly see them. What we saw were maybe half-meter-tall isopods. 3 large antennas sprouted from the tops of their heads, moving constantly as they spoke. They had a pair of compound eyes, below which sat a small mouth. Either side were 2 slits, which they used to breathe. Down their backs ran a segmented shell, in various shades of cyan. Their fronts were primarily a darker blue, lightening as it traveled along their limbs. They boasted 6 arm appendages, topped with 4-fingered hands, with a dozen legs beneath them. These were the Quelun. Comparing their physiology to ours, we quickly worked out that disease would be exceedingly unlikely to jump the gap. They soon agreed, seeing the results we produced. With a sense of importance, Captain Harris welcomed them aboard as they exited their craft. They were delighted to meet us, and we did our best to return it. A couple of our engineers worked with them to inspect their ship, trying to locate all issues. We quickly worked out that their FTL drive had suffered a critical overheat. It caused an overload, making itself a vent by blowing open part of the ship. This cascaded down their systems, causing their engines to shut down and the reactor to turn off in case of catastrophic failure. That made sense to us. However, what we failed to comprehend was why these shutoffs would require the ship to be docked to reverse. Maybe in a densely populated space it would work, but here it made no sense. Putting aside our disbelief, we towed them to the colony. An order was placed for as close to replacement parts as possible to be delivered to the colony. All the while, we piled them with questions on the galactic stage. To them, it looked like we were eager to join and meet our fellows from across the stars. We actively hid our true intent, letting them come to that conclusion. They gave us as much as they could, even allowing us to copy their star charts. With this at our disposal, the creation of the first Vengeance-class ship was begun, even as its shipyard was still under construction. Our timeline had been moved up. Our target had finally been spotted. Human Vengeance. Chapter 12. Two Faces. Our shipyards were a hive of activity. Throughout all hours of the day, refined materials were brought in. Construction progressed as fast as possible. Delays were simply not allowed to happen. Over Mars, the skeleton of the first Vengeance ship was put in place. Its size was awe-inspiring. Just from the structure, it promised to be more than 3 times the size of the ships that started our quest. Once completed, it would stand nearly 20 kilometers long. Enormous armaments were being constructed to be attached to the frame once completed. Its shields would be top-tier, powered by a dedicated reactor. The Quellon individuals knew nothing of this. From our discussions with them, it soon became apparent they were relieved by the fact we had saved them. Not only that, they were excited to introduce us to the galactic stage. Whilst we were known about, being the first to have proper contact would ensure their names went down in history. We played the part of an eager young race, acting as enthusiastic hosts. We treated them like royalty, giving them a sample of our products to consume. Our engineers worked hard to fix their broken drive, whilst making note of any interesting systems we hadn't used. Replacement parts were accompanied by diplomats from the Union, who proceeded to meet and greet all 5. It looked to be all sunshine and rainbows to them. We had some difficulty with their names being a series of clicks and whistles, but with their blessing, we gave them nicknames to ease communication, as close to their names as we could. The captain, Switzel, was the main focus, being their leader. She told us they were a group of travelers who had taken it upon themselves to explore this section of the galaxy for interesting planets. Her crew was made of a navigator called Kletch, a geologist named Zetnik, and a pair of part archivists, part general scientists, known as Floonbit and Deintiz. They loved everything we showed them, delighted at how alien we were to anything they had known. In short order, their ship was ready. They were almost sad at the prospect of having to leave us behind. But the sorrow soon faded as they extended an invitation for us to follow them in a ship to reach the assembly. It was an offer we were hardly going to refuse. GUS Wolf volunteered to accompany them. The Union was swift to approve the choice. As Wolf had been instrumental in creating a fully functioning translation software, it was in a prime position to adapt it to other races' ways of speaking, knowing it intimately. Besides that, although rare, there was a risk of pirates. The last thing we wanted was to lose our ticket to their assembly. As they told us most ships were small, we assumed GUS Wolf could handle them. Spinning up FTL drives, the pair of ships departed in the direction of their core of civilization. The travel would take just over a month, due to the size of their drive. We didn't complain, being more than happy to have more time to prepare. Achilles had taken their star charts, linking them to our own. We found that we had a significant buffer of empty worlds between us. From what we had been told, most races were slow to colonize. Most would only do a couple at a time, focusing resources in a few places. Our way of automating the process was different and far more efficient. We could easily fill much of the buffer, expanding our controlled space. Eve looked through their medical data. Using it as a guide, she made a virtual copy of each race. Coordinating with Achilles, they made an initial training simulation for our military. Using logical leaps in how their bodies moved, they could show an estimation of how a close-quarters fight would go. They highlighted key weaknesses they had noticed, ones that they thought would likely be covered in armor. Recorded instances of the Quilon were scrutinized. They seemed like good folks, ones who we wouldn't want to fight for no good reason. But we couldn't trust them not to get involved when the hammer fell. So we used it as a base for psychological understanding, seeing tells in how they spoke, seeing how easy or difficult it would be to break them. We hoped it wouldn't come to that. GUS Wolf powered on throughout the month's travel. The crew prepared non-stop. They trained constantly, keeping themselves in top condition. When not training, they studied what was known. They cleaned the ship relentlessly, striving to make a good first impression. When they came out of FTL, all eyes watched a feed from the bow. A binary star system sat before them. Gracefully orbiting them in a figure of 8 was an ornate space station. It was comprised of 2 large rings, with spokes linking to an axle between them. It was coated in gold, with a multitude of shining ships moving to and from it. Captain Switzel sent a simple message, oozing with joy. "This is Assembly Station, the center of our great collective.